Hi, I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity, and I have a lot to update you on this week. Here's the opening question. Are you prepared? In the past weeks at Peak Prosperity, we've been discussing things like emotional preparedness, which, by the way, is the most important form of preparation that you can undertake no matter what sort of future arrives. To be emotionally resilient is a really important facet and attribute and skill that we can all have. So we talked with a guy, John Arden, who told us about what science is learning about emotional resilience. And we can combine that with what we heard from our own Treebeard around the spiritual side of emotional resilience. Those are important. And the reason they're important is because volatility is returning to our markets. The chances of another 2008 style meltdown are very high again. Maybe this moment will pass. But that's been the theme so far in 2015 is the return of volatility to the markets. We've seen oil plunge, copper is plunging, iron ore and coal. Those are the big four that we are tracking to say, wow, the world's global economic situation, not strong, actually kind of weak. But the piece that I've been really focusing on myself is what's really going on with Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot happening there. It's off the front pages. If you're a US listener, it's off your front pages. In fact, it's even off your back pages. Nobody's writing about it anymore. But the US Senate and US Congress in December of 2014, a month ago, passed an act and a resolution, both of which were aimed at really putting a spear, another poke towards the bear of Russia. That's alive and well. The United States authorized the use and supplying of lethal aid to Ukraine. Now listen, if you're Russia and on your border you have these, let's be kind, ultra-nationalists, fascists, how about people gathering with SS Waffen insignia and swastikas? Those are some of the people who are in power. Not everybody, but a lot of the power base, up to 30% in Kiev, ruling parties in Kiev, 30% of them are made up of these ultra-nationalist folks who are people that in the past Russia's had a very bad experience with. But surprisingly, so has Europe. Where is Germany saying we should maybe not be supporting these sorts of folks again, but the West is, for reasons that are mysterious. And this brings us back to oil. We've seen that, there's stories out there that, maybe it's Saudi Arabia is just trying to put an ice pick in the U.S. shale play. Maybe that's a part of it, but there has to be a geopolitical component to the utter collapse in oil prices. Russia has not blinked in this story. They are the number one or number two producer, depending on how you count, the number one or number two exporter, again, depending on how you count, but clearly one of the key biggest players in the oil space. In Russia, all on its own, could, anytime they want, reduce oil exports, get the price back up. They're not doing it. So big game of international chicken going on. We've been looking at that. And then our two-parter this week on Peak Prosperity is from Charles Hugh Smith, and it's looking at how we as humans tend to model what success looks like based on talking to people who've been successful. And that isn't actually always the right thing to do. It's called survivorship bias. If you only talk to the people who made it through, the companies that made it through, the people who were successful, sometimes there was an element of luck involved, but we don't look at it that way. We say there must be something that these individuals, companies, countries did to achieve this level of success. Let's study that. By failing to look at how things didn't work, and this is sort of how humans are constructed, part of our own emotional makeup. By failing to look at what didn't work, we miss the fact that sometimes there's a lot of luck and elements of just raw chance involved, which means you can't replicate it, which means that when this next financial break comes, 2008 style, we'll probably try the things that we just saw worked. We'll print more money, we'll throw it all in there, but it's not going to work the same for a variety of reasons. Too much debt being a big one, the end of oil coming out of the ground in copious quantities very cheaply, another piece. Now, I know you're saying, wait, Chris, oil is kind of cheap right now. It's coming out of the ground. But what's not happening is we're not drilling any new wells really at this rate right now. We're rapidly dialing back all sorts of projects internationally in the United States. In the future, we're not going to have oil there. The reason we're not going to have it is because you can't drill for oil today at $50 a barrel or less and make any money at it. When you can't make money at it, people tend not to do it. So we saw just recently that the number of completions of new wells in November in the Bakken Play in North Dakota, 39 when a normal number would be well over 100. The activity is dialed way back. That means we're going to get less oil out of the ground in the future. So all of this is stewing. This is 2015. So we get back to the first question. Are you prepared? This is something that we're talking about actively at Peak Prosperity. We believe that you need to be prepared, that you need to understand that what the future is going to look like is probably going to be very different from the past we just came through. All kinds of tensions are mounting across the globe, not least of which is for reasons that I still can't quite fathom, and it bothers me a lot that I can't. The United States and Europe have decided that Russia has to be taught a lesson. That's something that the Russian people sort of constitutionally are not really open to, as I wouldn't be, and I don't think the United States would be much in the way of receiving somebody saying, you must do what I tell you to do, and it can't be any different than what I tell you to do. And oh, by the way, I'm going to do things that I just told you not to do. So that's the story we're at. The pressures are building. Come on by. We've got that new two-parter for you to look at. And really, this year of 2015 is going to be about the return of volatility, nowhere safe to hide in any of the asset classes. And oh my gosh, I still have to figure out what the Swiss National Bank did yesterday on Thursday, January 15th. What they did was they broke the peg where they had pegged the Swiss franc to the euro. And when they did that, all hell broke loose in the markets. Foreign exchange brokers, dealers went out of business because they got caught on the wrong side of this. Big banks lost tons of money. But the interesting part is the central bank, the Swiss central bank, didn't tell anybody they were going to do this. They just suddenly up and did it. That's a game changer. That is a kind of volatility that's really extreme because the underlying message in that is this: central banks are not bigger than the markets. Let me repeat that. Central banks are not bigger than the markets. The Swiss central bank tried to take on all of the various market forces that wanted to flee the euro and come into the safety of the Swiss franc. They held it as long as they could, and it broke. If the Swiss National Bank broke, it's a small bank. But what if the European Central Bank or the Federal Reserve come under the same pressures, can't do what they keep doing, and have to suddenly change? We think that's a theme for the next year or two because, let's face it, our central banks have taken us to a place where there really is no easy way out of this. We were supposed to get back to high growth. Didn't happen. Now we have to face up to the fact that we have all this new debt and no growth. There's a mismatch. That's what the volatility is telling us. Those things are coming together. So if you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe right here. And please come by Peak Prosperity, check out the new two-parter, and look at all the great content. Going to be a really fascinating year.